The Rosicrucian and Christianity Lectures by Max Heindel. Narrated by Matthew Schmitz. Lecture 17. The Mystery of the Holy Grail. In this lecture, we are to consider one of the old-time mysteries which existed in many parts of the Western world during the Middle Ages, and which has existed, in different forms, in different countries ever since the dawn of man's consciousness. As stated, in Europe in the Middle Ages there were a number of these mysteries. In northern Russia, the Trots taught a certain phase of the world mystery. In Ireland, the Druids flourished. Where we are told our forefathers worshipped under the oak tree, that implies the direction of the Druids, for Druid means oak. And when we are told that Boniface felled the oak, we may infer that Boniface put an end to the instructions of the Druids. In the northern part of Spain, the mystery of the Holy Grail existed. This mystery was administered by a band of holy knights who dwelt in the castle Montsalvat, and it was their purpose to proclaim to humanity great spiritual truths in a manner which it could understand, to give in pictures that which could not be given directly to the intellect. Man has grown up to his present stage from a state where he had no consciousness at all outwardly in the body. He is to go higher yet, and these myths and symbols were the means of preparing him for the intellectual perception of the way he was to go. So those who came in contact with these mysteries, those who were taught, and those who listened, are the ones who today are inclined to take an interest in these things, while the majority of people, who, of course, did not come under these instructions, are those who cannot yet feel the inner craving to live the spiritual life. Therefore, if we feel at all the spiritual influence within us, it shows that at some time, in some of these mysteries, we have been prepared for the reception of these truths in an intellectual manner, and it is the repeated impact given by the early teachers which brings humanity to the higher stage. For repetition is not senseless. On the contrary, it is of the very highest importance that a spiritual truth should be given utterance again and again. It has been stated here that humanity, the largest part of them at least, are working today upon their desire bodies and trying to curb their desires by means of law. Where occult development is to take place, however, where a man is to become a pioneer, it is the vital body that is to be worked upon, and the vital body is particularly and peculiarly acted upon by repetition. The vital body is the most important principle of the plant. It is that which makes the plant grow stem and leaf in alternating succession, so that the plant grows taller and taller. But there is no variety. The plant goes on repeating all the time. Stem, leaf, and branch, ever the same. That is the way everything acts that has only a vital body. So when we wish to act upon the vital body, we must do it by this method of repetition. We have the four ethers present in our vital body, and the two lower ethers take care of the physical functions, as we remember particularly from the lecture on spiritual sight and insight, number 11. We saw there that the two higher ethers had to be taken out when we wanted to function in the higher worlds, and this repeated impact is what makes the division between the two lower and the two higher ethers possible. That is where the churches are still factors in spiritual development, because they tell the devotee that he must pray without ceasing. But we are not to pray selfishly. We are to pray unselfishly and in harmony with the universal good. When we pray for rain and our neighbor for dry weather, chaos must prevail, if prayers were to be granted. Neither let us imagine that God is to be bargained with, as would seem to be the conception of some who are loudest at prayer meetings. There is a certain spiritual attitude attained, which the mystic knows so well when he enters into his closet. Prayer is like the turning on of an electric switch. It does not create the current, it simply provides a channel through which the electric current may flow. In like manner, prayer creates a channel through which the divine life and light may pour itself into us for our spiritual illumination. If the switch were made of wood or glass, it would be of no use. In fact, it would be a barrier that the electric current could not possibly pass, because that is contrary to its nature. To be effective, the switch must be made of a conducting metal. Then it is in harmony with the laws of electrical manifestation. If our prayers are selfish, worldly, and inconsiderate of our neighbor, they are like the wooden switch. They defeat the very purpose they were intended to serve, because contrary to God's purpose. To be of avail, prayer must be in harmony with the nature of God, which is love. The following lines appeared in London Light a number of years ago and have been treasured by the writer as an ideal prayer. Not more of light I ask, O God, but eyes to see what is. Not sweeter songs, but ears to hear the present melodies. Not more of strength, but how to use the power that I possess. Not more of love, but skill to turn a frown to a caress. Not more of joy, but how to feel its kindling presence near. To give to others all I have of courage and of cheer. No other gifts, dear God, I ask, but only sense to see how best those precious gifts to use thou hast bestowed on me. Give me all fears to dominate, all holy joys to know, to be the friend I wish to be, to speak the truth I know, to love the pure, to seek the good, to lift with all my might, all souls to dwell in harmony, in freedom's perfect light. That is the kind of a prayer that lifts, that ennobles a man, and the more a man or woman cultivates that attitude of mind and entertains those lofty aspirations, the more he is lifting the two higher ethers out of the vital body, and so the churches say, pray, 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 and they are well within the occult teaching, for in that way the vital body is being worked upon by the constant repetition of lofty aspirations. Before we can proceed along the occult path, we must of necessity have laxity between the upper and the lower ethers, so that we can function outside, leaving the dense body to be taken care of by the two lower ethers, and herein lies the trouble with the medium, and others who develop a certain phase of involuntary clairvoyance by breathing exercises. When such a person goes out of the body, he does it involuntarily. He takes three ethers along with him, and the body therefore is not taken care of. On this road lie mental and moral decline, and ofttimes insanity. There is only one safe way to develop our latent faculties. No matter what anyone may say to the contrary, experience will prove that attainment to spiritual powers depends on purification and unselfish aspiration, and that is what the mysteries taught in those olden times. In order to understand the mystery of the Holy Grail, it is necessary for us to go away back along the different epochs from the time when the earth first came out of chaos. Then the earth was dark, and man was embedded in the earth. Life was working in it to dig him out. Adam was of the earth, earthly as the minerals are now. Then we come to the second, the Hyperborean epoch, where man has a dense and a vital body. That was the plant stage. His food was the plants, and we hear of Cain as an agriculturalist. Next comes the Lemurian epoch, and man gets the desire body. He has three vehicles, like the animals. Then we have the stage where he is to have food of a nature that will feed all three bodies. This he gets from living animals, as when Abel was a shepherd. Next we come to the fourth epoch, the Atlantean, where man evolved mind. Thought always breaks down tissue and causes decay. Therefore man must have something in the food line which is prone to decay in his body, and so he begins to eat the decaying carcasses of animals. So we hear that Nimrod was a mighty hunter. Finally, he comes to that stage where he is to forget his spiritual nature. He is to think only of this life as the one life for him, and therefore he must have something to help him forget. That stage is ushered in by Noah and the few that were saved with him, who were the pioneers in the present Aryan epoch. And he is the one who cultivates the wine stock and makes the wine that is to help man to forget. Man is temporarily to forget the spiritual part of his nature in order to fully develop the material aspect, so Christ changes the water to wine, which is symbolically represented in his first miracle. In the earliest religions, only water was used in the temple service. The god of wine, Bacchus, had come in Greece previous to Christ to prepare the time of material debauch necessary to make man forget. And so man became more and more material. The Christian religion is the only one that sanctioned the use of wine. Man has consequently become more thoroughly immured in this physical vehicle. Now an impulse must be given to lift him out, and we are able to note evidences of this impulse in many directions at the present moment. We see it in the great temperance movement which has been sweeping over this country, this America, which has aptly been called the melting pot. Wine is being changed back to water. We have accomplished the conquest of the material world, as evidenced in our wonderful progress here in the West. Now we are to return to the use of water, that we may regain on a higher level that spiritual vision which we have lost. That is what this mystery of the Holy Grail aimed at, to purify man so that he might be able to regain that spiritual sight. And as we give our children picture books today, we were given these myths in previous times, that they might work upon our feelings and prepare us to understand. There were two characteristics which were very marked about these nights, purity and harmlessness, and these two qualities, purity and harmlessness, go together. We saw in the later lectures that when an entity, it does not matter whether a group spirit or an individual, is taken out of its body violently, with a jerk, as it were, as by killing, then there is always something left behind. If we take a ripe peach and cut it, the kernel falls out freely. It has no more connection with the flesh of the fruit. On the other hand, if we take a fruit which is unripe, a little of the flesh will cling to the stone. It will exhibit a tenacious tendency which is entirely foreign to the way in which the flesh of the ripe fruit acts. Consider this body of the stone. It is the hard, crystallized part, while the spirit is the subtle part. If we take this subtle part away suddenly, with a jerk, what happens? The physical body retains a part of that soul, whether it is of a human being or an animal, and that part is always the lowest part. When Christ went out in that violent manner, by death on a cross, something clung to the body of Jesus. That was the lower part of Jesus' higher principles, for even he, the most perfect man, had something that was imperfect, and it was necessary that it should be left behind, that only the absolutely pure part should be extracted. In the sudden killing of the animal, the lowest part of the soul clings to the body. The group spirit has lost the passions which remain in the flesh which we eat. That group spirit is thinking continuously, however, I must get another vehicle. That idea is impressed on every cell because of our wholesale murder, and so we have that intense sex craving in every particle of meat we eat, impelling us to satisfy its demand. It was Nimrod, the Atlantean, who first killed to eat, who inaugurated the social evil. And so we see that although we injure the animals when we kill them, we injure ourselves the more, for we have ever that social evil in consequence that stays with us. And when we speak of the social evil, we do not mean only that which we commonly call the social evil, that unhallowed thing of church and state, but any intercourse whatsoever except that which is performed as a sacrifice to provide a body for an incoming ego. Other use of the creative function, whether in greater or lesser degree, is nevertheless social evil. Now, when we understand the connection between the social evil and flesh-eating, the taking away of life from others, then we can understand why the Knights of the Holy Grail were pure and harmless, and until that time comes, the time when Parsifal breaks his bow, when he will no longer take life, when he says, I will no longer take these particles into my body that cry out for separate existence and want to create all the time, but I will live the pure and harmless life. Only when a man comes to that stage in life can he feel compassion. So long as we go out and kill, we cannot feel the true compassion. You and I, who live under such complex conditions, where killing is concentrated in one place, of course never see the animals killed. Yet we are as responsible for the fear and anguish which ensole them as if we had a personal hand on it. Could you and I go into that bloody pen and lift the knife, look into those dying eyes, and then go and enjoy our victim's flesh? We could not. We have gone too far in evolution for that. It is only because we are able to get the flesh without having the noisome sights of the slaughterhouse before us, and yet you and I are doing a great harm to another fellow being. Because you and I do not want to go there, he has to stand there day after day, month after month, and year after year, and kill and kill and kill. You and I are escaping the brutality which we see concentrated in him, concentrated to such an extent that the law holds him as an outcast in certain respects. It will not allow him to sit on a jury where capital punishment is involved because he has become so brutalized that he has lost all regard for life. Friends, let us cease to be destructive. Let us aim to be constructive, and let all creatures live. They have as much right to life as we have. Ella Wheeler Wilcox prefers their claim in the following beautiful words. I am the voice of the voiceless. Through me the dumb shall speak. till a deaf world's ear shall be made to hear the wrongs of the wordless weak. The same force formed the sparrow that fashioned man, the king. The God of the whole gave a spark of soul to furred and feathered thing. And I am my brother's keeper, and I will fight his fight, and speak the word for beast and bird, till the world shall set things right. Now we have come so far that we begin to see the application of these things more and more that we have seen in Parsifal and the Holy Grail. We see it is the beginning of compassion when we leave off our lower appetites. We become pure in thought, desire, and body, and so we are going onwards. Here we have in this myth, as presented by Wagner, one of the most wonderful interpretations of the fact that a certain class of us may go forward and become helpers of humanity. Parsifal is the man who has purified himself and has become harmless. That was seen and felt spiritually by Wagner on yon Good Friday morning when he sat by the Zurich Sea and saw all around him life forces operating. Innumerable seeds were sprouting all around this wonderful flow of life, and Wagner asked himself what connection could there be between the Saviour's death upon the cross and this sprouting forth of everything in nature. And there he struck upon the very heart of the mystery of the Holy Grail. We remember from the last lecture particularly how man is the inverted plant. Plato gave this occult view when he said the world soul is crucified. The horizontal limb of the cross represents the lines of influence of the animal group spirits which circle the earth, manifesting through the horizontal spine of the animals. They are between the plants and the human kingdom. The plants are represented by the lower limb of the cross, and man by the upper limb. We know that the group spirits of the plants are in the center of the earth, and that they are radiating lines of force which are continually passing through the trees and plants. Man, on the other hand, receives his spiritual influence from the sun through the head, and is therefore the inverted plant in that sense. We also know that the plant takes its food through the roots, and man through the head. The plant is chaste and passionless. It stretches its creative organ chastely towards the sun, a thing of beauty, the flower. Man stretches his passion-filled creative organ towards the earth. Man exhales the poisonous carbon dioxide, while the plant sends out the life-giving oxygen. So man is the opposite to the plant. Now, in the mystery of the Holy Grail, man was brought to use, or rather, he was brought to feel these truths. He was told, "Look around you. See everywhere in nature all these innumerable plants growing, all these seeds sprouting. That creative force which you see in them is nothing but what is in you and in every human being. But in the plants it expresses itself in the opposite way. There is the chasm of passion between the plant and the God. The animals are also passion-filled. They have the red, passion-giving blood. But in the plant we see chastity, and that chastity must be regained. There are certain stages of advancement which you are to go through. You are to become pure and passionless again. Therefore this emblem, the Grail cup, which you see here, is like the pod of the plant that holds the seed. That is the emblem of purity, which you are to hold before your gaze all the time in order to aspire to that high ideal, that purity which is embodied in the plant. This conception is also embodied in the communion cup used in the churches, which is emblematical of the ideal we are to strive for, and in the German, the communion cup has the same name as the pot of the flower, Kelch. In different other languages, its name also has a similar meaning. Thus, the Holy Communion cup is not a wine cup, but it is a cup which we may look upon as containing the very essence of life in pristine purity, a quickening spiritual essence, not the paralyzing spirit that Noah brought, not the fermented spirit of decay, but that life-giving fluid which is the blood of the plant. There, we have a description of one of the emblems held up to the pupils of the mysteries as ideals to be realized in him. The other was the Holy Spear, symbolized by the sunbeam that comes down and opens the flower. The sunbeam is the representation of the spiritual flower which is working to bring forth all through the universe, a power most potent, but also most dangerous when used without discrimination, or abused, as we see so forcibly accentuated in the legend of Parsifal, where Parsifal, Amfortas, and Klingsor represent these three classes. Amfortas, who used the spiritual power without discrimination, Klingsor, who used it for selfish purposes, and Parsifal, who used it in the only way it should be used. The power is the same, but produces different effects as it is variously used. Fire is man's greatest ally when under control and used for good purposes, but used with evil intent or ignorantly, it becomes dangerous. Parsifal represents the mystic whose feelings have become aroused. He is not fit to have the spiritual power until he has been tempted and tried, for one whose feelings are intense is very apt to make mistakes. Against the manifestly evil he is secure, because of his very innocence, as when Parsifal fails to perceive anything sensual in the advances of the flower maidens. He is so guileless and pure that does not affect him at all. But innocence is not by any means synonymous with virtue. Innocence is a negative purity such as we find in all children, and is very, very different from the virtue which has come unscathed through the fire of temptations, and is kept on the path of rectitude, guided by an innate feeling of right. Innocence is untried and inferior to the virtue of the sinner who has repented and reformed, and is strong for the right as the path of peace and joy, because he has known the sufferings which are encountered upon the pathway of wrong. Amfortas is tempted and falls and suffers. Parsifal witnesses his suffering and can sympathize with his pain, because of having broken the bow and become harmless. The man who can kill cannot also feel compassion. The one who is harmless is the tender of heart, and sees what a benefit pain is. Usually, Parsifal is so glad and joyous he has left Herslid, sorrow, behind. See him in the garden with the flower maidens, his face beaming with innocent joy. Then comes the temptation of Kundry, and it causes pain, something Parsifal is not used to, and, by the power of association, there comes before his inner vision that other scene where he felt pain, the scene in the Grail castle where the stricken king was ministering at the sacred rite. He sees and understands, because of sympathy which his harmlessness has engendered. But for that, he too might have fallen to the subtle temptations of Kundry. Klingzor is the very antithesis of Parsifal. He is no fool. He has knowledge, and by knowledge he wields his power entirely apart from feeling. He has mutilated himself. He has killed all feeling instead of seeking to control it. When we go along the mystical path, the feelings are most potently aroused, and unless we have become harmless also and cease to live upon the food imbued with lower feelings, we are extremely apt to fall, as witness to the well-known fact that ultra-devotional people are exceedingly strongly sexed and have been the cause of great church scandals, denounced as hypocrites, when in reality they were as true as steel, but were unable to control the intense waves of feeling which swept them away because of impure food. Klingzor is not minded to run such chances, so he has mutilated his sex organ and thus made it impossible for him to gratify that craving and lose his power, as Amfortas did when he fell before the charms of Kundry. Also, in the Nibelungen ring, we hear the same principle enunciated, that the one who desires power must forswear love. Alberic, the Nibelung, does that in order to possess the Rheingold, and it becomes a curse to gods and man. When the head or the intellect rules apart from the feelings, as it does in the intellectual occultist, the black path lies before that man, but in the blending of head and heart is the true balance, the only safety. Amfortas could not have fallen if he had been harmless, but he was contemplating a misuse of the spiritual power symbolized by the spear. He was going to use it without due discrimination against Klingzor. Therefore, it reached upon him and wounded him. The black and the white magician both use the same force, a spiritual power, and it is as impossible to use a spiritual force to harm a spiritual man as it is to drown a fish in water. Therefore, when Klingzor hurls the spiritual power, the spear, at Parsifal, it floats harmlessly above him, and Parsifal directs it against the castle only, not against Klingzor. The good cannot use good for direct destruction of evil, but only indirectly by showing them the greater power of good. As the flower draws the vital force, the spiritual power, from the sunbeam in a pure and chaste manner as it unfolds its harmless beauty, so must we unfold in purity and harmlessness the spiritual powers latent in man. Neither must we kill or cut ourselves off from the expression of the feelings, as some have done who have taken vows and have entered monasteries or liked sheltered environments, where they are out of the way of temptation, or at least where temptation cannot mature to acts. Desire may be as strong in a monk as in a knight, but the monk has made it impossible by his vow to gratify desire, while the knight is free to choose good or evil. If he manually overcomes the temptation, as Parsifal did, he evokes in his being that higher love which is as far removed from sensual passion as heaven from hell. We as Christians are like King Amphratus. We have lost our spiritual powers temporarily on account of our abuses and impurities. But out of the ashes of that state shall come the new Christianity symbolized by Parsifal, which shall heal the sufferings of the old and take its place. That personal condition of which the Holy Grail is emblematical is the state where the evanescent gives way to the lasting and permanent. We build our bodies on flesh foods, which leave it very quickly. Even vegetables are not stable. Our bodies can change altogether in a few years. The plant, on the other hand, has a body that lasts for ages, even after the life has left it, as seen in wooden buildings that last a century or more. What is the secret? The tree is almost purely carbon. Where did it get the carbon? From the carbon dioxide exhaled by animal and man. In other words, we are in every breath throwing away that which would build a stable body if kept. What becomes of that wood? In millenniums, it is transmuted to coal, black carbon. The hardest and most durable substance on Earth is white carbon, the diamond. If we could find a way of retaining that carbon, we would become what the Hindu calls the diamond soul, the perfect immortal body. We should be manufacturing what the Rosicrucian calls the philosopher's stone, which is the liquor vitae, the panacea for all the world's woe. We should then know the meaning of the sea of glass in the New Jerusalem and understand the significance of the molten sea, which was the last work of Hiram Abiff, the grand architect of Solomon's temple, built without hands. For these all express the same truth as the Holy Grail, and are only attainable by those who are pure in heart, who have overcome the world, and are helpers of humanity.